Hi, and welcome to episode 17 of the ChessTDD series. I can imagine you would have had no trouble predicting what I'd go to right at the beginning. I'm going to give this method a name that's better than the one I had picked before. First and foremost, so that I don't look stupid. No, I'm just kidding. In reality, so that anybody coming along, including myself, to maintain this code base understands something more about the code than just that somebody didn't know what to name it at a particular moment in time. So it's got a good name now, I think, at least good enough to be better than the one that was there. So it's time to do the next thing. And going into this post, I decided to switch gears a bit and get away from some of the more kind of heavy selection and filtering logic that I've been doing on the board, and opt instead to implement the move piece method that's been sort of making my test setup a little bit awkward, where I'd had one that I populated the row of non-pawn pieces and then the pawn pieces in two different classes. So I'm thinking that it's kind of almost overdue that I do this so that I can, if nothing else, be more clear and explicit in the test method setup, but also over the course of time, it's probably going to be necessary to have this. Now, given that this is a sort of example experiment in teaching, learning as I go, I don't know who the end user is. If it's just a matter of, given a board configuration, show me possible moves, then I guess theoretically I don't need move piece, just add piece. But if this were going to be a more broad-ranging engine for the business logic of chess, then certainly move piece and capture and remove piece would all be necessary. So what I'm doing here is I'm creating another test class in which I'm going to copy this same sort of given and method name and should. So I'm going to say the board move piece, given chessboard without pawns, and I'm going to forget to put should in initially, and then I'm going to remember later. And it hasn't really, I haven't been in the habit of doing I've been in the habit of writing a test method kind of explicitly and then refactoring toward this field level setup. And I've been doing a good bit of Java code lately, and I don't know if it's just a language switch or if it's something else, but I've kind of gotten more towards just defining this target right away from the get-go and not refactoring toward it. I don't know whether that's better or worse. Either way probably doesn't matter too much and has its advantages and disadvantages, but here we are. So I'm kind of getting right to the point with this. And in this particular case, it's sort of more necessary because I guess theoretically I could call that giant class name and static method inline in the test, but there's a good bit of setup that's going to go to every test method that's in this class. I think maybe part of this naming scheme is also pushing me towards just initially defining a class level variable, because that's the point at which this setup is going to apply. So here I'm starting to type out what the method should do. And what I started to say is it should result in a piece at 1-3 when the rook at 1-1 is moved to 1-2. What happened was, while typing that, I decided, I was saying, well, I'll just move it ahead 2 spaces, and that's kind of random and arbitrary. And as I was going on, I thought, wait, why would I move it 2 spaces? It seems like the sort of simplest, most upfront case would be to move it 1 space. So instead of going with the 2 spaces, I decided in the middle of typing the method name that I would move it 1 space as sort of a simple case. And I think that's sort of, and you'll see I remember in a second to actually change the name, I promise. This isn't like last time. And I'm going to add a card in here too. But I think a good point to make here is that I want to implement relatively simple test cases, not just the simplest thing I can do to get a test case to pass, but if I'm sort of diving into new functionality, I want to approach simple functionality first, make simple changes to the system. So back to what I'm doing, I've got this move piece method, and the code is not compiling, which is a failed test, so I need to make it pass. And I am moving the move piece method up here with the public methods in this class to kind of keep the public API at the top of the method or at the top of the class, and then the private methods that assist in the implementation down below. So to get this to pass, all I needed to do was get rid of that exception that was being thrown. So now I'm going to actually make an assertion, and what I want to assert is that all I've said in the test method name is that I want to assert that there's a piece at the destination 1, 2. Not necessarily anything about which piece or that a piece is gone from the origin. I'm going to get to all that and demonstrate here that you kind of want to use the simplest thing to get it passing to separate out a mental model. So even though it seems simple, pick up the piece from square A and move it to square B, there are actually a few different things that go on here. And from an implementation perspective, internally especially, getting rid of the piece at the origin, adding a piece to the destination, those are the things that make up a movement. So I want to write tests that kind of drive at that model of thinking instead of just getting right to the point where I'm going to take multiple steps. I would not only want to do the simplest possible thing, but kind of along the lines of what I was just talking about. I want to write tests, the simplest kind of test that I can think of at first to drive functionality, and then separate what I'm driving at in those terms. So the next thing is that I want to make sure that there isn't a piece at the original spot once I move this piece. So the way I'm going to do that is by calling the same kind of logic here, move piece. And then I'm also going to feel the pain of typing this repetitive stuff here, which is going to make me have a mental note that I should probably do some factoring of this setup. But I'm not going to worry about that just now while I'm writing a test. I'll come back once I've made this go red and then back to green. That'll be part of my refactoring this test method. All right, so that goes red because I haven't removed the piece from get1. From 1-1, I should say. That rook is still there. I made this previous method pass by just adding a piece to the destination, and arbitrarily it was a pawn. So I'm going to make another note here too, and I'm trying to be a little bit better as I go on about making notes of things I want to improve, because I'm getting kind of close to a working implementation. So now I'm starting to get a little more critical of what I've done. I'm less in prototyping mode, and I'm more in improvement and well, I don't want to say perfection. That's kind of the wrong word to use, but I'm being a little more critical of the code now, so that's going to generate more to-dos. This is also a great counterpoint when it comes to what you'll hear with TDD about, naysayers and that it takes, that if you do TDD, you can no longer prototype. Why should I write tests if I might throw them out? What you can see is that I'm sort of prototyping implementations here, skunkworks kind of things, and you'll get to watch as I sort of clean up this code as I go. I'm not trying to get the best thing ever, but I'm also not really writing throwaway code. I'm trying to keep the whole thing flexible and always sort of expand or growing towards a better implementation. So what I did there is now I am both creating a new piece at the destination and removing a piece from the origin, but it's not the same piece. That's going to require another test. However, before I do that, I had talked about wanting to refactor a little here to get rid of this duplication. So what I'm seeing here is that for at least one more test case and quite possibly a few more after that, I'm just going to codify an origin and destination coordinate. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm putting them into this test to make it a little more readable, because I had origin coordinate was in this test twice, board coordinate .4, 1, 1. So I don't want that bit of duplication in there. So I factored that out, and while I was at it, I factored destination coordinate out. Then what I noticed at some point here as I was starting to type this test method was that I actually wanted to pull those up to the class level and eliminate the duplication in the first test method. So I started typing the name of this test, and now what I wanted to test was what I mentioned, is that instead of removing and adding a piece, that we're actually doing the move concept. We're adding the same piece as the one that's being removed. And what I started to do here was exactly what I had sort of warned against a little bit ago, which was to refactor while in the middle of a test. But there's a subtle difference here, which is that I am not actually in the middle of the test. I've stubbed out a test method. There's no functionality there. I'm still green. So it's perhaps a touch sloppy, or at least scatterbrained, but I'm not really creating any possible problems. An empty method that's technically green is not going to be the source of any issues, most likely. I mean, I'm sure you could come up with some kind of crazy scenario with reflection over the whole code base or something, but that doesn't apply here. I'm trying to be pragmatic. So what I'm doing is I'm saying, okay, let's keep this whole thing green and refactor on the test side, where I'm defining, at least for the purpose of a number of tests, and that's all I'm worried about at the moment, an ongoing origin and destination to use, and I'll write a series of tests around those. And this is making the code in general here look a lot cleaner and readable, in my opinion. There's not this board coordinate 4 stuff, and maybe I'll go think about these semantics at some later point, but everything's staying green. The dots are going bold again, so that's good. And now you have this pretty readable test method: target.movePiece, origin, destination. I think that's pretty easy to read. So now using this, I'm glad to have it for this new method that I'm about to write. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same kind of move, and then I'm going to define actually what the piece is at the origin. So I'm going to invoke the target's get piece, and I'm going to get the piece from the origin. And then I'm going to say that once I perform this move, I want to go and I want to check that I have a reference to the same piece here when I get the piece from the destination. So I want to say that this piece at origin, and I probably need a better name than that, is the same as the get piece, not at the description attribute, but at the destination coordinate. That goes red, so what I want to do is make the test pass. That was probably a slight no-no there, that rename refactoring, but I think I did it before I even thought better of it. It's an extremely low-risk change, so I didn't go back and edit out my mistake in the TTD process for the purpose of this video. It's not egregious, but I probably shouldn't have done that. Even a rename is a risk, even though it's an automated and very simple refactoring. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to get a reference to the piece I want to move before I go removing it. So I'm going to get that reference, and then I'm going to need to set the piece at the destination to this piece I've got a reference to. And then I can go ahead and null out the origin. And this makes everything green. This method looks a little awkward to me, and I think I toyed with the idea of inlining it. Maybe I did that right here and then didn't really like the way it looked with all this origin and destination stuff on one line. I don't know which of those is better. Neither of them looks particularly great to me. So I gave a moment of thought here as to what it was I wanted to do, and then decided to move on. So what I want to do next here is start to say, okay, so there's a lot that can go wrong in this method if you're just looking at that, all that, -1 and indexing arrays and such. So at the very least, I need to test, and I don't want to think quite yet. I'll come back to this maybe in the next segment or the next time I address the move and remove and all that. I don't want to think quite yet about how I want to handle move piece for an origin where there isn't a piece. I might want to throw some kind of custom exception, or maybe I'll stick with argument exception and flesh out those different things later. But I haven't thought that through yet. One thing that is a no-brainer is that I definitely need to throw an exception if I'm giving it a board coordinate that's just not within the bounds of the board. So 1,9 is a piece that doesn't exist on our board. So clearly I can't allow that. It's going to, I believe, create problems Yeah, so I think piece to move there is the exception's being handled. You don't see the red X because I'm asserting that an exception is thrown, but that is an exception. It's just not the one that I want. It's array out of bounds or something. So what I want to do in here is I want to check and say, is the origin coordinate valid for this board size? And since it isn't, I'm going to throw origin. Now I'm going to write the same test here for the destination coordinate. Same logic applies. I can't pass in some coordinate that's not on the board. So what this is going to do holistically is that for both of the arguments to this method, I need to be in bounds. Not rocket science, but necessary to do. And this is a place where I personally feel that the TDD approach really shines and help me make my code a lot more robust, which is as you go and you do this back and forth of getting something to pass, incrementally adding functionality, and then refactoring, you're looking a lot at your method and you're thinking of things like, ooh, I'm doing these unguarded array accesses. What happens when something out of bounds goes on? And then you start getting in this discipline of writing tests to expose that situation instead of just kind of going in wholesale and saying like, well, I'm going to implement a bunch of boundary checking, if this is null or if that's null or if this is whatever. And sometimes you get a little carried away with that and you start guarding against things that may never happen or that you don't really care about. And the cadence of TDD, one thing at a time, back and forth, sort of lets you walk a good path with that. So now that I'm green, I'm going to extract a method because all that guarding was sort of detracting from what I was really trying to do in the method, which is move the piece. Then I came up and tried to take a look at, I wanted to make that method, or I was wondering about making that an instance method, and I thought board size, I just assumed that would have been implemented as a instance field. So when I saw that method go static from the extraction, I was surprised. And then I went up and saw that I was kind of hard coding and I had this useless default board size. So I think what I was originally going for was default board size kind of being hard coded into the class, but then making the board size settable to something other than the default. But I don't have that yet, so I'm making a note to do it later. Here's another thing I want to do. I don't mind losing the specificity of origin and destination in the exceptions. So I'm going to refactor this to be a params method instead of taking specifically two board coordinates. This way I can probably find a use for this later where I can do validation on parameters to methods that take only one argument or three if I were going to do that. So now I'm still green, and what I'm doing is I'm just taking an arbitrary number of parameters to this method, which I'm happy about that implementation. So next up, let's see, I believe I was looking at some other kinds of refactorings. This time around I'm recording it a day later, so I don't remember exactly what. I think should throw exception when attempt is made to move non-existent piece. Oh, I didn't think I had gotten this far. But I guess I did think this through and didn't exactly remember what I had thought of, but it seems as though I have the same taste as myself, which is I had sort of alluded to, oh, maybe I should throw an argument exception, and it looks like that's what I'm going to do. So if I move the piece from the destination to the origin, which is a subtle little difference here, there's nothing at the destination, so yikes. And I'm going to want to then trap and throw an exception. And as I was doing this, now I kind of remember this implementation. So I've got this conditional here below piece to move or the piece to move assignment, and I'm not really exactly liking the way this method is shaping up. So what I kind of decided inline here was that I wanted to maybe make use of these other public methods, especially considering that conceptually move piece is going to involve get piece, add piece, remove piece if I had it. So instead of all these ugly array axes. I want to do that as infrequently as possible from an implementation perspective. So since I'm already doing it in getPiece and addPiece, why don't I use those instead of uglying up this method? So that's what I kind of set out to do. As long as I've got these nice unit tests to help guard this and make sure that all my class level behaviors are still doing the right thing, then hey, I've got this great way to refactor. So why don't I, and I didn't even necessarily think it through fully to see if this would work from the beginning. Another thing I love about the test suite, I just said, okay, well, let's see what happens if I use addPiece instead of what I was doing before. And then I had this sort of horrible and brilliant idea to addPiece with a null method, or with a null parameter. And based on my looking at it, I think this should go green, and I'm pretty sure it does. And then I go and write myself a to-do in Trello to say, yuck, that shouldn't go green. I shouldn't be able to add null piece. What I really want is semantics for remove piece, because add piece with a null argument is really remove piece, just done in a sort of strange way. So, another lesson to take away here, don't get yourself into a situation where you have sort of strange or awkward semantics to your API. Give nice names to things. Add piece null, comma, whatever is awkward when you're saying this in conversation. Remove piece with a piece argument is very intuitive. Add piece null coordinate, ugh. So I'm wrapping up by kind of cleaning up what I want to do here. And I'm going to prioritize these pieces a little for next time. And speaking of next time, that's when I will see you again. So thanks for watching.